Welcome to the sleepy underworld, a place where romance blooms, magic sparkles, and timeless fairy tales are reimagined for the dreamers of today. From heart-stirring romances to spellbinding adventures, every story is a soothing escape into a realm of love, wonder, and charm. So curl up, press play, and let us carry you away to the land of dreams. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. We'd love to know in what part of the world you are watching and what is your favorite tip for a good night's sleep. Thank you for watching and enjoy the video. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have as I carried it down from the attic. Perhaps it was the weight of memories rather than its physical contents. 6 months had passed since I buried Ronnie, but time had done little to fill the void he left behind. Our brick colonial house, once warm with laughter and whispered promises, now echoed with silence and unanswered questions. I placed the box on our bedroom floor, dust particles dancing in the afternoon sunlight that filtered through half-drawn curtains. This was the last of Ronnie's personal items I needed to sort through. I'd been putting it off, postponing this final acknowledgement that he was truly gone. "Just do it, Shayla," I whispered to myself, running my fingers along the edge of the worn cardboard. "You can't keep hiding from this forever." Inside, I found the expected items: old college textbooks, faded concert tickets from our early dating years, and a collection of baseball cards Ronnie had sworn would be valuable someday. Memories flooded back with each discovery: our first apartment with the leaky faucet, weekend road trips with no destination in mind, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. I smiled despite the tears forming in my eyes. This is what I needed. Tangible reminders that our 15 years together had been real. That the love we shared wasn't just a beautiful dream from which I'd painfully awakened. Then my fingers brushed against a manila envelope at the bottom of the box. The paper felt cool to the touch as I pulled it out. Nothing written on the outside. I opened it and slid the contents onto the plush cream carpet. Photo prints, dozens of them spilled out around my knees. I picked one up, expecting to see familiar faces of friends or family gatherings. Instead, I found myself staring at something incomprehensible. Ronnie stood before a modest ranch-style house I'd never seen, his arm wrapped around a young woman with caramel-colored skin and a hesitant smile. 2 small children, a boy and a girl, perhaps 5 and 3 years old, stood in front of them. The boy had Ronnie's unmistakable cowlick, the same stubborn tuft of hair that refused to lie flat no matter how much product was applied. My breath caught. The world tilted. "This can't be right," I murmured, flipping through more photos with trembling hands. Ronnie pushing the little girl on a swing set. Ronnie at what appeared to be a birthday party, candles casting a warm glow on his face as he leaned toward the young woman. Ronnie helping the boy ride a bicycle, his large hands steadying the small frame as training wheels kicked up dust on a driveway. I felt a peculiar numbness spreading through my body, as if I were watching myself from a distance. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps these were distant relatives I'd never met, or children of a friend from his business trips to Kansas City. But as I examined more photos, the truth became undeniable. The casual intimacy, the ease of their body language, the way Ronnie looked at this woman, it was the same way he had looked at me. The dates on the backs of some photos confirmed what my heart already knew. These weren't old pictures from before we met. They were recent, some taken just months before the accident that claimed his life. I sank back against the bed frame, clutching a photo to my chest. Ronnie had been living a double life. The man I thought I knew better than anyone, the man who whispered, "You're my everything," each night before sleep claimed him, had created a whole separate world away from me. A world with another woman, with children who shared his blood. The realization hit me with physical force, doubling me over. I rushed to the bathroom, barely making it before the contents of my stomach emptied themselves violently. Afterward, I slid to the cool tile floor, pressing my cheek against it as sobs racked my body. This couldn't be happening. Not to us, not to me. But the evidence lay scattered across our bedroom floor. Irrefutable proof that the foundation of my life had been built on lies. The next morning, I called in sick to the elementary school where I taught 4th grade. My students would have to learn about the water cycle from a substitute. I couldn't fathom standing before 28 eager faces, pretending my world hadn't just imploded. I spent hours online, searching social media for any trace of the woman from the photos. It didn't take long to find her. Marissa Taylor, interior designer, single mother of 2. Resides in Pleasant Hill, just 30 minutes from our home in Kansas City. I stared at her profile picture, studying the woman who had unknowingly shared my husband with me. She was beautiful, in an understated way, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Not the homewrecker I wanted to vilify in my mind, but a real person with a life and children who had lost their father just as suddenly as I'd lost my husband. Did she know about me? Was she also discovering that her relationship had been built on deception? I picked up my phone a dozen times that day, composing messages I never sent. What would I even say? Hello, I'm the wife of the man you loved. The absurdity of the situation might have made me laugh if it hadn't been tearing me apart. Instead, I drove. With no destination in mind, I let the wheels carry me through familiar neighborhoods that now seemed foreign. The world continued around me, people walking dogs, checking mail, living normal lives, while mine had shattered into unrecognizable fragments. I found myself at Swope Park, where Ronnie and I used to picnic in the early years of our marriage. Settling on a bench overlooking the duck pond, I watched children throw bread to eager waterfowl as families laughed together in the late spring sunshine. Why? I whispered, my question carried away by a gentle breeze. Why wasn't I enough? No answer came, just the distant laughter of children and the gentle rippling of water. That evening, I attended my grief support group at Covenant Presbyterian, our church for the past decade. I sat in the circle of folding chairs, listening to others share their journeys through loss, wondering if anyone would believe my story if I told it. Instead, I spoke vaguely about having a difficult day, about missing Ronnie more than usual. Pastor James approached me afterward, his weathered face creased with concern. Shayla, I sense there's more weighing on you tonight than you've shared, he said gently. My door is always open if you need to talk. I nodded, managing a weak smile before hurrying to my car. I couldn't tell him, couldn't tell anyone, about the photographs. Speaking the truth aloud would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared to face. The next few days passed in a haze of sleepless nights and mechanical actions. I returned to teaching, grateful for the distraction of 28 energetic 9-year-olds who needed me to be present. But each evening brought me back to the same questions that circled like vultures in my mind. How had Ronnie maintained this deception for years? Where had the money come from to support another household? Had any part of our marriage been genuine? On Sunday, I almost skipped church, not feeling spiritually connected enough for worship. But habit drove me to slip into a back pew just as the service began. I stared at the stained glass windows, barely registering the hymns or responsive readings. Then Pastor James stepped to the pulpit to deliver his sermon. Today, we're exploring one of the most challenging commands in Scripture, he began. Forgiveness. Not the easy kind that comes when someone steps on your toe and immediately apologizes. I'm talking about the forgiveness that seems impossible. The kind that requires divine intervention because our human hearts simply aren't designed to bear such weight alone. My attention sharpened as he continued. Ephesians 4:32 tells us, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." Notice it doesn't say forgive if they deserve it, or forgive if they're sorry. It simply calls us to forgive as we have been forgiven. I I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Forgiveness is not about excusing the sin. It's about setting yourself free. Pastor James's voice resonated through the sanctuary. When we hold on to resentment, we become prisoners of our own making. The person who wronged us may never know or care that we're suffering, while we continue to carry the burden of anger day after day. His words pierced through the protective numbness I'd cultivated. Tears slid down my cheeks as I recognized the truth in what he was saying. I was angry, furious even. But my anger couldn't change what had happened. It couldn't bring Ronnie back to explain himself, or undo the betrayal that now colored every memory of our life together. After the service, I drove to East Patrol Cemetery. Ronnie's grave was marked with a simple headstone, his name and dates etched in granite. I placed fresh flowers in the bronze vase and sank to the ground beside the plot that contained what remained of the man I thought I knew. "I don't know how to forgive you for this," I whispered, running my fingers over the cool stone. "I don't even know if I want to." But Pastor James's words echoed in my mind. Setting yourself free. Was that even possible? Could I find a way forward that didn't involve carrying this anger and betrayal for the rest of my life? As I drove home, a crazy thought took root in my mind. What if I met her, this Marissa Taylor? What if, instead of hiding from this painful truth, I faced it directly? The idea terrified me, yet it also offered something I desperately needed. Action instead of paralysis, movement instead of stagnation. Before I could reconsider, I turned my car toward Pleasant Hill. The modest rancher looked exactly as it had in the photographs. Pale yellow siding, neatly trimmed hedges, and a small concrete porch with a patio swing. A tricycle lay on its side in the front yard, evidence of the children who lived inside. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, my courage faltering each time I reached for the door handle. What was I hoping to accomplish? What could possibly come from confronting this woman? But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the quiet street, I knew I couldn't leave without answers. I needed to see her face, to hear her voice, to make sense of this shared tragedy that connected us in the most painful way imaginable. The porch light flickered on as I approached the front door, my legs moving as if operating on their own accord. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock. 3 soft raps that seemed to echo in the evening stillness. Footsteps approached from inside. The door opened, and there she stood, the woman from the photographs. Marissa Taylor. In person, she appeared more tired than in her pictures, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She wore simple jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Can I help you?" she asked, confusion evident in her voice. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How do you introduce yourself in such a situation? Finally, I managed to speak. "I'm Shayla Larson," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was no reaction. Then recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a complex series of emotions: guilt, sadness, and something unexpected: fear. "Ronnie's wife," she breathed, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. I nodded, unable to form words as the reality of our situation hung heavy between us. I don't know what to say," Marissa finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Neither did I, but standing there on her porch, looking into eyes that had also loved and lost Ronnie, I realized something important. She wasn't my enemy. She was just another woman caught in the web of lies Ronnie had spun around both our lives. "May I come in?" I asked quietly. "I think we have a lot to talk about." She hesitated for just a moment before stepping aside, opening her door and her life to me. The interior of her home was warm and lived in. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, and colorful artwork adorned the refrigerator. It was a home filled with love, just as mine had been. "The kids are already asleep," she explained, leading me to a small kitchen table. "Can I get you something to drink? Water? Tea?" "Water would be fine," I replied, taking a seat and watching as she filled 2 glasses. Her hands shook slightly as she placed one before me. "How did you find out?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Photographs," I answered simply. "In a box in our attic. You and the children with Ronnie." She closed her eyes briefly, pain etching lines around her mouth. "I always told him we should be honest, that keeping secrets would only lead to more pain in the end." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "He insisted it was better this way, that no one needed to get hurt." "Yet here we are," I observed, "both hurting anyway." Marissa nodded, meeting my gaze directly for the first time. "For what it's worth, I didn't know about you at first. By the time I found out, Jordan was already born and I..." Her voice trailed off. "You loved him," I finished for her. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me. I did." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women connected by a love for the same flawed man. Was he good to you?" I asked, not entirely sure why I needed to know. A soft smile touched her lips. "He was. He loved the children fiercely. Never missed a school event or doctor's appointment. He was here every weekend, sometimes more." My mind raced, piecing together the puzzle of our shared past. The business trips, the late meetings, the weekend conferences, all fabrications designed to give him time with his second family. "I thought we were happy," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I believed every word he said." "So did I," Marissa replied, tears welling in her eyes. "That was his gift, wasn't it? Making us feel like we were the center of his universe." A noise from the hallway interrupted our conversation. A small figure appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Mommy?" the little boy called, his voice thick with sleep. "I had a bad dream." Marissa rose immediately, going to him and kneeling at his level. "It's okay, Jordan. Mommy's here." I stared at the child, Ronnie's son, with his father's cowlick and chin dimple. Emotion welled up inside me, not anger or resentment as I might have expected, but something more complex and painful. This boy and his sister were innocent victims of their father's choices, just as Marissa and I were. "Who's that lady?" Jordan asked, peering at me over his mother's shoulder. Marissa glanced back at me, uncertainty in her eyes. What could she possibly tell him? "I'm an old friend of your dad's," I said gently, surprising myself with the steady calm in my voice. "I just came to check on you and your mom." Jordan nodded, accepting this explanation with the straightforward trust of childhood. "Dad's in heaven now," he informed me solemnly. "But Mom says he watches over us all the time." "I'm sure he does," I replied, my throat tightening around the words. After Marissa took Jordan back to bed, she returned to the kitchen, her expression a mixture of gratitude and caution. "Thank you for that," she said, reclaiming her seat. "They've had enough confusion and sadness." "They're beautiful children," I offered sincerely. "They're all I have left of him," she replied, fresh tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Some days that's a blessing. Other days, it's a curse." We talked for hours that night, sharing our versions of Ronnie, the man each of us thought we knew. We discovered similarities in our stories, patterns in his behavior, and lies he told both of us. With each revelation, the idealized image of the man we had loved crumbled further, replaced by the reality of who he truly was. Deeply flawed, selfish in many ways, yet somehow still capable of genuine love and kindness. As midnight approached, I gathered my purse to leave, emotionally drained, yet strangely lighter than when I'd arrived. "What happens now?" Marissa asked as she walked me to the door. I paused, considering the question carefully. "I don't know exactly, but I'd like to meet your daughter too someday, if that's okay with you." Surprise flickered across her face. "You would?" "They're Ronnie's children," I said simply. "And in some strange way, that connects us." She nodded slowly. "Lucia would like that, I think. She asks about having a bigger family sometimes." As I drove home through the quiet streets, I reflected on the evening's unexpected turn. I had gone to Marissa's house seeking answers, perhaps even looking for someone to blame. Instead, I found another woman trying to piece her life back together, raising children who would grow up without their father. I wasn't ready to call what I felt forgiveness, not yet. But for the first time since discovering Ronnie's betrayal, I could imagine a future where anger didn't consume me, where healing might be possible. Spring gave way to summer, and with the changing season came a gradual shift in my heart. Marissa and I continued to meet, sometimes with the children, sometimes just the two of us. Each encounter was a delicate dance of shared grief and cautious friendship, but it was also a step toward something I never expected to find: a new kind of family. Jordan warmed to me quickly, his open nature reminding me so much of my fourth-grade students. He loved dinosaurs and could recite facts about prehistoric creatures with impressive accuracy for a 6-year-old. Lucia, at 4, was more reserved, studying me with serious eyes that seemed too wise for her young face. But over time, she began to seek me out, showing me her dolls or asking me to read her favorite stories. "Aunt Shayla, watch this," Jordan called one warm July afternoon as I arrived at the community pool where we had arranged to meet. He jumped into the water with wild abandon, creating a splash that drenched his mother and sister. Aunt Shayla. The title had evolved naturally over our meetings, a way to explain my presence in their lives without delving into complexities they weren't ready to understand. Somehow it fit. Not quite a mother, but more than a friend. A bridge between what was and what could be. Marissa smiled apologetically as she handed me a towel. "Sorry about that. He's been practicing his cannonball all week, specifically to show you today." "I'm flattered," I laughed, wiping water from my face. "That was quite impressive, Jordan." As the children splashed in the shallow end, Marissa and I sat at a nearby table under a large umbrella, watching them play. "They ask about him less now," she said quietly, her eyes following her son's energetic movements. "I don't know if that's good or bad." "It's normal," I assured her, thinking of the grief counseling sessions I'd continued to attend. "They're young. Their memories will fade faster than ours." Marissa nodded, absently twisting the silver bracelet on her wrist. A gift from Ronnie on her 30th birthday, she had told me previously. "Sometimes I feel guilty," she admitted, "for moving forward, for having days when I don't think about him at all." "Me too," I confessed. "But I think that's what healing looks like. Not forgetting completely, but finding a way to carry the memory without letting it define every moment." Later that evening, after we had parted ways, I found myself driving to the cemetery again. I hadn't visited Ronnie's grave in weeks, the anger that once drew me there having gradually dissipated into something closer to acceptance. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds as I placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. Unlike my previous visits, I didn't feel the need to speak aloud. Instead, I sat quietly, reflecting on the strange journey of the past few months. I thought about forgiveness, not as a single act, but as a process unfolding gradually. Each day with Marissa and the children had been a step along that path, each shared memory of Ronnie another stitch in the tapestry of grace we were weaving together. Had I forgiven him completely? Of course not. There were still moments when the betrayal felt fresh, when questions without answers burned in my chest. But I was learning to live alongside those questions, rather than being consumed by them. And in that space, between the hurt that remained and the healing that had begun, I found something unexpected: gratitude. Not for Ronnie's deception, but for the unlikely connections that had emerged from its revelation. For 2 children who now had a place in my heart. For a friendship with Marissa that defied conventional understanding, but offered both of us something we desperately needed: companionship in our shared journey through grief. Pastor James had been right. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing the sin. It was about setting myself free from its power to destroy what remained of my life. As I rose to leave, I traced Ronnie's name on the headstone one last time. "I'm learning to forgive you," I whispered. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and new beginnings. School resumed, filling my days with lesson plans and enthusiastic students. On weekends, I often found myself at Marissa's house, helping Jordan with homework or taking Lucia shopping for her first day of preschool. "You don't have to do this, you know," Marissa said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. The children were in the living room, engrossed in a movie about talking animals. "Spend so much time with us, I mean. No one would blame you if you wanted to put all this behind you." I considered her words as I dried a dinner plate. "At first I came because I needed answers," I admitted. "Then I kept coming because it felt like the right thing to do, for the children." "And now?" she prompted. "Now I come because I want to," I said simply. "Because somehow, in all this mess, we've created something good." She smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in a way it hadn't during our early encounters. "We have, haven't we?" That night, driving home, I realized how much had changed in 6 months. The woman whose existence had once shattered my world was now someone I texted daily, someone whose children called me Aunt Shayla, and ran to greet me with sticky hugs and endless stories. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't even a life I could have imagined. But it was real and meaningful in a way that honored the best parts of what Ronnie had been to both of us, while acknowledging the harm his choices had caused. The following weekend, I invited Marissa and the children to my home for the first time. I had hesitated for months, uncertain how it would feel to have them in the space Ronnie and I had shared. But as I watched Jordan explore my backyard and Lucia admire the wind chimes on my porch, I knew it had been the right decision. "This is a beautiful home," Marissa said as I showed her around. There was no envy or resentment in her voice, just genuine appreciation. "Ronnie and I bought it thinking we'd fill it with children someday," I shared, leading her into the kitchen. "That never happened for us." She squeezed my hand gently. "I'm sorry, Shayla." "It's okay," I replied, surprising myself with how true the words felt. Life rarely turns out exactly as we plan it, does it? Later, as the children helped me plant tulip bulbs in the garden. "They'll bloom in spring," I explained to their wide-eyed wonder. Marissa took photos with her phone. "For their memory books," she explained when I glanced up questioningly. "I want them to remember this day." That evening, after they had gone home, I sat on my porch swing watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. The photos she had taken showed me kneeling in the soil with Jordan and Lucia, all 3 of us laughing as dirt smudged our cheeks. Looking at those images, evidence of joy found in the aftermath of heartbreak, I felt something shift within me. A final letting go of what might have been, and an embrace of what was. Ronnie's betrayal had torn apart the fabric of my life, leaving ragged edges and frayed threads. But from those broken pieces, something new was being woven. A tapestry of grace, stitched together with forgiveness, compassion, and unexpected love. It wasn't perfect. There were still rough patches and loose ends. days when the anger resurfaced or questions haunted me in the quiet hours before dawn. But those moments no longer defined me. Instead, I found myself looking forward to Jordan's upcoming school play, to Lucia's birthday celebration, to Thanksgiving dinner, which we had decided to share together this year. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't erase the past. It didn't make Ronnie's choices any less painful or wrong. But it created space for a future I never could have imagined, one where healing happened not in isolation, but in connection. Not through forgetting, but through redefining what family could mean. As the first stars appeared overhead, I made a silent promise to myself and to the children who had unexpectedly become part of my life. I would continue this journey, one day at a time. I would honor the pain of the past without letting it poison the present. And I would embrace this strange, beautiful tapestry of grace that was being woven from threads of loss and redemption. Because sometimes, the family we never expected becomes the greatest blessing of all.